The hotel lobby smelled of pine and old memories. Eleanor Ashford, 62, stood frozen as snowflakes melted on her cashmere coat, staring at the woman across the marble floor. Diana Castellano, 59, silver-haired and still devastatingly familiar, looked up from her sketchbook. Their eyes met for the first time in 37 years. The Swiss Alps loomed outside the windows, indifferent to the earthquake happening in that elegant room. Some love stories don't end, they just wait. Eleanor had built a life of controlled beauty. As chief curator of Boston's prestigious Harrington Museum, she orchestrated exhibitions that drew crowds from across the globe. Her Manhattan apartment overlooked Central Park. Her wardrobe was impeccable Armani and Chanel, and her calendar was perpetually full. At 62, she wore her silver bob like a crown and her independence like armor. The invitation to authenticate a private collection in Zermatt, Switzerland, had seemed like perfect timing. Her daughter was spending Christmas with her father's family, leaving Eleanor free to escape the hollow echo of her expensive apartment. She hadn't expected Diana. Diana Castellano had spent 3 decades transforming interiors into sanctuaries. Her design firm had offices in Milan, Paris, and Santa Fe, where she'd settled after her partner passed 7 years ago. At 59, she'd begun accepting only projects that spoke to her soul, which was why she was in Zermatt, designing the interiors for a sustainable luxury resort that would honor the mountain landscape rather than impose upon it. They'd been 25 and 22 when they'd fallen in love in Florence. Both were students, Eleanor studying art history, Diana architecture and design. They'd spent 6 months wandering cobblestone streets, making love in a tiny apartment overlooking the Arno, planning a future that felt inevitable. Then Eleanor's father's sudden death had called her home to Boston. Diana had promised to follow within months, but life, as it often does, had interfered. Eleanor's mother's grief had been all-consuming. Family obligations had piled up. Diana's scholarship had been extended. Letters had grown less frequent, phone calls more strained. Eventually, they'd both moved on, built other relationships, constructed other lives. Now, in the Hotel Montservin's lobby, time collapsed. Eleanor, Diana's voice was deeper than she remembered, textured with years of client presentations and design critiques. Diana! Eleanor's hand trembled as she removed her glove. They stood awkwardly, 2 elegant strangers who'd once known every inch of each other's souls. "I'm here working on the new resort interiors," Diana said. "You?" "The Rothstein collection. Caravaggio, supposedly. Likely a very good copy." Professional Eleanor was always easier than vulnerable Eleanor. "Coffee?" Diana asked. She should have said no. She had work, jet lag, a carefully constructed life waiting back in Boston. But standing there with snow painting the windows white and 37 years of wondering pressing against her chest, she found herself nodding. They sat by the fireplace, and for the first hour they were careful. They discussed careers, accomplishments, the impressive lives they'd built. Diana's partner had been a gallery owner, a brilliant woman, gone too soon to an aneurysm. Eleanor's husband had been a finance executive. Their divorce 10 years ago had been civilized and empty of real emotion. But then Diana said, "I never forgot Florence," and the careful walls began to crack. The next morning, Eleanor found herself accepting Diana's invitation to visit the resort site. She told herself it was professional curiosity. Diana had always had exquisite spatial vision. She didn't examine why she chose her dove-gray cashmere sweater, the one that brought out her eyes, or why she applied lipstick with unusual care. The drive up the mountain was breathtaking. Diana drove with confident ease, pointing out design elements of chalets they passed, explaining her vision for interiors that would blur the boundary between inside and outside, between shelter and nature. Eleanor found herself genuinely captivated, not by the design, but by the passion in Diana's voice. This was the Diana she'd loved, the dreamer who believed spaces could change how people experienced life. At the site, wind whipped around them as Diana spread fabric samples and sketches across a makeshift table. See here, she pointed, natural linens and colors pulled from the mountain, stone grays, snow whites, touches of alpine flower colors, furniture from local artisans, every material telling a story of this place. You always wanted to create spaces that mattered, Eleanor said softly. In Florence, you used to sketch rooms that would make people feel more human. Do you remember? Diana looked at her then, really looked, and she saw it, the same intensity that had made her abandon every careful plan she'd ever made. I remember everything, Ellie. No one had called her Ellie in decades. They had lunch at a small restaurant in the village, tucked into a corner table as locals conducted their daily business around them. Over rusty and wine, the conversation deepened. Diana asked about her work, and Eleanor found herself describing not the prestigious exhibitions, but the quiet moment when she'd stood alone in the gallery after installing a Vermeer, feeling the weight of beauty that had survived centuries. You're still you, Diana said, still finding meaning in the spaces between what everyone else sees. And you're still trying to create heaven on earth, Eleanor replied. The words hung between them, laden with everything unsaid. That evening, back at the hotel, Eleanor sat alone in her room, cashmere throw wrapped around her shoulders, looking at the mountains turning purple in the dusk. She thought about her daughter, about to turn 33, always pushing Eleanor to take risks and stop being so controlled. She thought about her elegant apartment that no longer felt like home. She thought about Diana's hands, more delicate than she remembered, but still graceful, spreading those fabric samples with such care. Her phone buzzed. Diana. Dinner tomorrow. There's a small place in the old town. Best fondue in Switzerland, and I'd like to hear about the Caravaggio. She should focus on work. She should maintain boundaries. She should protect the life she'd so carefully constructed. She typed, 8 o'clock? Diana's response was immediate. Perfect. Eleanor smiled, set down her phone, and for the first time in years felt genuinely uncertain about what came next. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. The Caravaggio was real. Eleanor confirmed it on her third day in Zermatt using portable X-ray fluorescence and her own decades of expertise. The Rothsteins were delighted. She should have booked her flight home immediately. Instead, she accepted Diana's invitation to dinner, then to a winter market, then to a concert in a medieval church where Bach's cello suites made her cry. They were courting, she realized, not with the desperate passion of their 20s, but with the careful attention of people who knew the cost of mistakes. Every conversation was a negotiation between past and present, between who they'd been and who they'd become. "Why didn't you come to Boston?" Eleanor asked one night, after wine had loosened both their tongues. They were in Diana's rental apartment, a beautifully appointed space she'd already made her own with textiles and art. And the question that had haunted Eleanor for 37 years finally escaped. Diana was quiet for a long moment. "I was afraid," she finally said. "Your father had just died. You were dealing with your mother's breakdown, and you'd just come out to your family. I convinced myself you needed space, that I'd be a burden. And then I met Sophia at an exhibition. She was kind and present and didn't require me to be brave." "I married Richard for similar reasons," Eleanor admitted. "He was successful and stable and couldn't hurt me because I never fully let him in. And he never asked questions about what I really wanted." "Did you love him?" "I respected him. I built a life with him. But love?" She shook her head. "I think I used up my capacity for that kind of love in Florence." "Ellie." Diana reached across the space between them, took her hand. Her thumb traced circles on Eleanor's palm, a gesture so familiar it made her chest ache. "What are we doing?" "I don't know," Eleanor whispered. "I'm 62 years old. I have a life in Boston. You're working here and you have a home in Santa Fe. We're not impulsive kids anymore." "No," Diana agreed. "We're women who've learned that time isn't infinite, that chances don't come around twice, except apparently when they do." They made love that night, and it was nothing like Florence. It was slower, more careful, marked by bodies that had been reshaped by decades and loss. But it was also deeper, more present, infused with the knowledge of exactly what they'd both lost when they'd let each other go. Afterward, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets, Eleanor felt the tears come. Diana held her, saying nothing, understanding everything. "I can't do this casually," Eleanor said. "I'm too old to pretend that this doesn't matter." "Then don't pretend," Diana said. "Neither of us has to pretend anymore." The next week was a study in possibility. They fell into a rhythm. Mornings apart working, afternoons exploring mountain trails, evenings cooking together in Diana's apartment. Eleanor found herself laughing more than she had in years. Diana seemed lighter, less burdened by the perfectionism that had driven her career. But reality waited. Eleanor's return flight loomed. Diana's project would keep her in Switzerland for at least another year. "Come with me to Santa Fe for Christmas," Diana said the night before Eleanor's departure. "Meet my daughter. Let's see if this is real outside of this mountain fantasy." Eleanor's careful, controlled heart screamed no. But something else, something that remembered Florence and had been sleeping for 37 years, whispered yes. Santa Fe surprised her. She'd expected Diana's home to be a showpiece of design innovation. Instead, it was a warm, lived-in adobe in the historic district, filled with Sophia's paintings and her daughter's childhood artwork. It was the home of a woman who'd built a real life, not just a beautiful facade. Diana's daughter, Isabella, 32, a documentary filmmaker, was wary at first. She looked at Eleanor with the protective skepticism of a daughter who'd watched her mother grieve too deeply. But Eleanor understood. She'd be protective too. So she didn't try to charm or perform. She was simply herself, asking Isabella about her latest film on women artisans in Mexico, helping Diana prepare pozole for Christmas Eve, not trying to take over or fit into a role that wasn't hers. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell softly on the Sangre de Cristo Mountains and Billie Holiday played, Isabella cornered Eleanor in the kitchen. "She talks about you like you're both the love she lost and someone completely new," Isabella said. "Mom loves Sophia deeply. You're different, something that makes her seem both settled and awakened at the same time." "Your mother's partner was an incredible woman," Eleanor said carefully. "I'm not trying to replace her. I know. That's why I'm willing to give this a chance." Isabella smiled slightly. "She's been alone for 7 years. I've been worried. But this, it's complicated, isn't it?" "Very," Eleanor admitted. "I live in Boston. She's committed to Switzerland for another year. We're both established in our careers and our lives. And we're both old enough to know that love doesn't conquer all. Logistics matter, timing matters, all the practical things matter." "But," Isabella prompted, "but I spent 37 years wondering what if, and I'm tired of wondering." Diana appeared in the doorway. "The plan is that we're figuring it out, slowly, like adults who've earned the right to be cautious." "That's a terrible plan," Isabella said. "You're both supposed to be good at plans." "Some things can't be blueprinted," Diana said, looking at Eleanor with such tenderness that she felt her careful defenses crumble a little more. They spent New Year's in Boston, where Eleanor's daughter Miranda was equally protective and curious. "You're glowing," Miranda said. "It's weird. I've never seen you glow, and you seem, I don't know, more yourself than I've ever seen you." Over the next 6 months, they built something new. Diana came to Boston twice. Eleanor visited Santa Fe and made 2 more trips to Zermatt. They video called daily, sharing the mundane details that actually make up a life. Diana's frustration with suppliers, Eleanor's battle with the museum board over a controversial acquisition, Isabella's engagement announcement, Eleanor's mother's declining health. They argued, too, about politics, about whose family to spend holidays with, about Eleanor's tendency to overthink, and Diana's habit of avoiding difficult conversations. But they argued as equals, as women who'd lived enough to know that conflict didn't mean ending. In June, the resort held its soft opening. Diana invited Eleanor to see the completed interiors, and she stood in the main lobby in a pale linen suit, speechless. Diana had created magic, spaces that felt both luxurious and humble, contemporary and timeless, rooted in place yet universal in their beauty. That night, overlooking the work she'd created, Diana said, "The project will be finished in 3 months. After that, I'm scaling back the Milan and Paris offices. I'm 60 years old, and I don't want to spend what's left creating beautiful spaces for other people while neglecting my own life." "What do you want to create?" Eleanor asked. "A life. With you. If you'll have me." Eleanor looked at her, this woman she'd loved at 25 and was learning to love again at 62. "I've been offered the directorship of a museum in Albuquerque," she said. "I'd be fully in charge, able to build something from the ground up. I haven't accepted because it would mean leaving Boston, leaving everything I've built. And I'm thinking about accepting. Albuquerque's an hour from Santa Fe. We could build something together without either of us sacrificing everything." Diana pulled her close. "Not Florence," she said. "No," Eleanor agreed. Better than Florence, because we're better than we were." 2 years later, on a December evening, Eleanor and Diana stood on the terrace of the completed resort. Snow fell softly on the mountains as guests arrived for a holiday gala. Eleanor, elegant in midnight blue, held Diana's hand. She'd taken the Albuquerque position. Diana had designed a stunning home for them between their 2 cities. They spent weekdays apart, focused on work they both loved, and weekends together, learning the rhythms of this second chance life. It wasn't perfect. It was better than perfect. It was real. "No regrets?" Diana asked, silver hair gleaming in the light from inside. Eleanor thought about Florence, about the 37 years between then and now, about the life she'd built and the one she was building. "Only one," she said. "That we wasted so much time being afraid." Diana kissed her then, surrounded by mountains and snow and possibility. Some love stories don't end. They just wait for you to be brave enough to begin again. Have you ever reconnected with a lost love? Do you believe in second chances? Share your story in the comments. We read every one. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes it's never too late for authentic love and new beginnings. Subscribe for more real stories about mature love, second chances, and the courage it takes to live your truth.